Your doctor just told you your cholesterol is perfect. Your blood pressure is textbook normal. You run 4 days a week. You eat salads. You sleep 8 hours. You are, by every standard metric, the picture of health. And none of that matters. Because right now, inside your chest, a catastrophe could be quietly assembling itself with 0 symptoms, 0 warning, and 0 detectable signal on any routine test you've ever taken. That is not a scare tactic. That is the biology. The most dangerous kind of heart attack does not announce itself. It waits. It grows in silence behind a wall of perfect adaptation, and the people most likely to be blindsided by it are precisely the ones who think they're safe. If you have ever wondered how a marathon runner dies at mile 22 with no prior history, if you have ever heard about a colleague who seemed completely fine and then wasn't, this video is going to explain exactly what is happening inside that person's body, and more importantly, it is going to show you what you can actually do about it before the moment that changes everything. I'm so glad you found this. At Nature and You, we go deep into the science your body is trying to tell you, but doesn't know how to say. If that matters to you, subscribe right now and hit the bell. Every video we make is a piece of information that could one day matter more than you expect. Let's get into it. To understand why a healthy heart fails, you have to first understand what makes a heart healthy in the first place. Your heart is a muscle. It squeezes roughly 100,000 times a day, 35 million times a year, for your entire life. That kind of relentless work requires a constant, uninterrupted supply of oxygen. And that oxygen arrives through a network of 3 main arteries coiled around the outside of the heart like irrigation pipes wrapped around a field. Cut the water supply to one section of that field, and that section dies. It is that simple. It is that brutal. The largest of those pipes is called the left anterior descending artery. Cardiologists call it something else. They call it the silent killer, or more precisely, the Widowmaker. Because a blockage there does not just affect one corner of the heart. It cuts supply to the front wall of the left ventricle, which is your heart's main engine, the chamber that pumps oxygenated blood out to your entire body. Block the Widowmaker, and you are not losing a leaf from a branch. You are cutting the root of the whole tree. So how does a blockage form in someone who is doing everything right? Think of your artery walls as a freshly painted hallway. When the walls are young and smooth, everything flows cleanly through. No friction. No snagging. Blood cells glide past the inner lining, called the tunica intima, like watered-down glass. But over time, that perfect surface takes damage. High blood pressure hammers the walls like a constant pressure hose. Elevated blood sugar acts like fine sandpaper, wearing away the coating. Even the mechanical stress of years of high-intensity exercise can create microscopic tears in that lining. Your body sees those tears and does exactly what it is designed to do. It sends a repair crew. LDL cholesterol arrives at the site and patches the damage, the way spackle fills a crack in drywall. Then the immune system dispatches white blood cells to inspect the repair. Those cells absorb the cholesterol, they grow fat and rigid, they calcify. They eventually become what medicine calls foam cells. And that hardened mass of cholesterol, calcium, immune debris, and cellular waste is what we call plaque. The process has a formal name, atherosclerosis. Now here is the belief that gets people killed. Most people imagine plaque the same way they imagine a clogged drain. They picture the pipe getting narrower and narrower. They assume they will feel it happening, that they will get short of breath climbing stairs, or feel some tightening in the chest as the opening shrinks. They assume their body will warn them. That assumption is the single most dangerous misconception in cardiovascular medicine. Here is what actually happens. As the plaque grows, the artery wall stretches outward to accommodate it. The pipe does not narrow. The outer wall simply expands to preserve the inner opening. This process has a clinical name that is almost poetically cruel. Positive remodeling. Your body is so good at adapting that it makes the problem invisible. The plaque grows, the artery adjusts, and the blood keeps flowing normally. You could have a massive accumulation of plaque pressing against the outside of your artery wall, while the interior remains completely, perfectly open, normal blood flow, zero symptoms. You can run 5 miles and feel electric. This is why the first sign of heart disease for half of all men and nearly 2/3 of all women is not pain, it is sudden death. They were fine. Until they weren't. So what breaks the silence? What converts years of quiet, invisible accumulation into a fatal event? It comes down to one word. Stability. Not all plaque is the same. Older, calcified plaque is hard, dense, stable. It sits against the artery wall and causes relatively little immediate danger. But newer plaque is different. Newer plaque is soft. It is filled with inflammatory material, lipid-rich and reactive, and it is covered by nothing more than a thin fibrous cap, a delicate membrane barely keeping its contents contained. Think of it as a pimple under pressure. The skin is thin, the contents are volatile. All it needs is the right trigger. That trigger can be a sudden spike in blood pressure, an intense burst of physical exertion, an emotional shock, a rush of cortisol at 2 in the morning. Any of these can crack that thin cap. When the cap ruptures, everything inside floods into the bloodstream. The body sees it as a massive wound. Platelets race to the site and begin clotting the blood with desperate efficiency. In minutes, that clot grows so large it seals the artery completely. Not the slow buildup of plaque, not a gradually narrowing pipe, a sudden catastrophic cork. Blood flow stops. In a matter of minutes, the tissue downstream begins to die. And here is the detail that makes this especially terrifying. The plaques most likely to rupture are not the biggest ones. They are not the ones that would show up as a dangerous blockage on a basic scan. Research consistently shows that the majority of fatal heart attacks occur in arteries where the blockage was less than 50%. The small, soft, inflamed plaques are the killers, not because they are large, because they are fragile. But there is another scenario that rarely gets discussed, and it specifically targets people who consider themselves the healthiest among us. Consider a 47-year-old woman named Claire. Claire has competed in triathlons for 11 years. Her resting heart rate is 52. Her last physical was flawless. During a training run, she does not feel crushing chest pain. She feels a strange fatigue that does not match her effort level. She feels slightly nauseous. Her vision swims for a few seconds. She slows to a walk and assumes she pushed too hard in the heat. At the hospital, her blood work reveals elevated levels of a protein called troponin. Troponin is worth understanding carefully. Inside every heart muscle cell, troponin sits like the liquid inside a sealed glow stick. As long as the casing is intact, nothing leaks, but when heart cells die, they rupture, and the troponin spills into the bloodstream. Doctors can detect it within hours of injury. Claire's troponin is elevated. She is having a heart attack. But when they image her coronary arteries, they do not find a complete blockage. They find a 55% narrowing in one vessel. So how is she having a heart attack with blood still getting through? This is a supply and demand mismatch, and it is the hidden enemy of every endurance athlete who has ever pushed toward a personal best. At rest, a 55% blockage is almost irrelevant. The pipe is narrowed, but enough blood moves through to meet the heart's modest demand. The lawn gets watered, no problem. But when Claire's heart rate climbs to 165 beats per minute, her heart's oxygen demand skyrockets. It needs a fire hose. The narrowed vessel can only deliver a trickle. The gap between supply and demand becomes a crisis. The tissue suffocates. This is ischemia, and it can happen without any rupture, without any clot, simply because a heart that was designed for rest is now running at maximum load with a compromised fuel line. The people most at risk for this particular scenario are not couch sitters. They are people exactly like Claire. People who have trained their hearts to demand enormous amounts of blood, but who have never had their arteries evaluated to see whether those arteries can actually keep up. There is also a factor that multiplies the danger dramatically and is often dismissed as a nuisance condition. It is called atrial fibrillation. Your heart normally runs on a precise electrical rhythm. The upper chambers fire in sequence with the lower chambers, creating a coordinated squeeze that moves blood efficiently. In atrial fibrillation, the upper chambers stop firing cleanly. They quiver. They send chaotic, erratic signals. The lower chambers struggle to keep up. The heart beats too fast, too irregularly, too inefficiently. Combine that electrical chaos with even a moderate narrowing of a coronary artery, and the math becomes fatal. The heart cannot fill fast enough between beats, the arteries cannot deliver fast enough to meet demand, and the margin for error evaporates completely. This is why atrial fibrillation and coronary artery disease are not two separate problems. Together, they are a single dangerous system. Now let's talk about the 70% threshold, because this is the number that governs when your body finally sends a signal you can actually feel. In most people, you will not experience chest tightness, pressure, or breathlessness during physical activity until an artery is approximately 70% blocked. Below that number, the heart compensates. It routes blood through smaller vessels. It adjusts. It absorbs the restriction. Above 70%, you might feel discomfort climbing stairs that goes away when you stop. Medicine calls this stable angina. It is your body's check engine light. It means the underlying system has been failing quietly for years, and the compensation mechanisms are beginning to exhaust themselves. The cruel irony is that people who get stable angina are, in some ways, the fortunate ones. Their plaques are large enough to cause symptoms, which means they are also large enough to be detected, treated, and managed. The people who never get the warning light are living with soft, inflammatory plaques that are too small to restrict blood flow, but volatile enough to rupture without notice. But your body is not entirely without defenses. There is a backup system building itself right now in response to everything you do. It is called collateral circulation. Think of your coronary arteries as highways. When a lane closes, traffic backs up. But over months and years of persistent restriction, your heart paves new roads. Tiny subsidiary vessels grow around the blockage, rerouting blood supply through alternate paths. This is why a 72-year-old with decades of moderate coronary artery disease might survive a heart attack that kills a 38-year-old. The older heart had time to build its detours. The younger heart, hit without warning, has no alternative route when the main road suddenly closes. The most powerful tool for accelerating that collateral network growth is exercise. Specifically, consistent cardiovascular training in the moderate intensity zone, the kind where you can speak in short sentences but not hold a full conversation, paired with carefully managed higher intensity intervals. This kind of training sends a signal to your coronary vasculature that demand is rising, and vessels grow to meet that demand. Exercise is not just burning calories. It is literally building infrastructure that could save your life on the worst day of it. But infrastructure takes time, and in a cardiac emergency, time is the only resource that matters. In emergency medicine, the phrase is, "time is muscle." At 20 minutes after a complete blockage, irreversible cell death begins in the affected tissue. At 90 minutes, the window for meaningful intervention is closing. Heart tissue that dies becomes scar tissue. Scar tissue does not contract. It does not pump. It is a permanent anchor on cardiac function for every year of life that follows. This is why recognizing symptoms, the actual symptoms rather than the Hollywood version, is not optional knowledge. It is survival knowledge. The Hollywood heart attack looks like this. A man clutches his chest, staggers backward, and collapses. In reality, That presentation applies to a portion of male patients and is far less common in women. For women, the warning signs are quieter, profound fatigue that appears suddenly and does not match activity level, shortness of breath without exertion, a sense of indigestion or nausea, pressure or discomfort in the jaw, neck, or upper back, and perhaps the most under-recognized symptom of all, a sudden overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling that something is deeply wrong that cannot be explained. Physicians call it a sense of impending doom, and it is documented in the literature as a genuine physiological signal from a body recognizing its own emergency. Do not dismiss it. Do not wait to see if it passes. That hesitation, that minute of hoping it is nothing, costs lives every single day. Now let's talk about what you can actually do. Because there is a gap in the standard prevention narrative that needs to be closed. The tools most people rely on, routine blood panels, cholesterol numbers, blood pressure readings, are ingredients lists. They tell you what is circulating in your blood. They tell you nothing about whether those ingredients are building deposits against your artery walls. A person with textbook cholesterol can have extensive plaque. A person with elevated LDL can have clean, healthy arteries. The numbers are meaningful context, not definitive answers. The first scan that changes this is called the coronary artery calcium score, or CAC score. It is a 5-minute CT scan that detects calcified plaque in the coronary arteries. The result is a single number. A score of 0 means no detectable calcified plaque and a genuinely low short-term risk. A score above 400 means significant accumulation that warrants aggressive management and close monitoring. This test is inexpensive, fast, involves minimal radiation, and is one of the most predictive single measurements available for assessing cardiovascular risk in people with no symptoms. Yet most people have never heard of it. The second scan is more detailed and more revealing. A CT angiogram goes further. It visualizes not just calcified plaque, but soft plaque, the young, unstable, lipid-rich deposits that are most likely to rupture. This is the scan that catches what the CAC score misses. If you have a 0 calcium score but ongoing risk factors, soft plaque may already be forming. A CT angiogram makes it visible. Beyond scanning, the most impactful controllable levers are blood pressure management and blood sugar control. High blood pressure is mechanical sandpaper against artery walls every single day for years. Even modest sustained elevation accelerates endothelial damage far faster than most people realize. Systolic pressure consistently above 130 is not a mild concern to revisit in a year. It is a daily injury. And blood sugar dysregulation, even in the pre-diabetic range, drives inflammation at the artery wall in ways that accelerate plaque formation, weaken fibrous caps, and increase rupture risk. These are not abstract risk factors. They are active biological processes happening right now, today, in millions of people who do not yet know they are happening. Quit smoking if you smoke. There is nothing else to say about that. The effect of cigarette smoke on endothelial lining is direct, measurable, and catastrophically accelerating to every mechanism described in this video. Manage chronic stress, not because stress is an abstract wellness concept, but because sustained cortisol elevation raises blood pressure, promotes inflammatory signaling, destabilizes plaque, and increases clotting tendency. The emotional and the physiological are not separate systems. Sleep. Sleep is when blood pressure drops, inflammatory markers reset, and repair processes activate. Consistently poor sleep correlates with elevated cardiovascular risk through mechanisms that are well documented and poorly appreciated by most of the people living with them. And know your numbers. Not just total cholesterol, but particle size and density. Not just fasting glucose, but hemoglobin A1C, which reflects your blood sugar average over 3 months. Not just blood pressure at the doctor's office, but blood pressure at rest, under mild stress, and across different times of day. The healthy heart attack is not a contradiction. It is a tragedy of incomplete information. People who believed they were doing everything right, because they were doing everything the standard checklist told them to do, without ever asking whether that checklist was designed to find the kind of problem they had. You can be metabolically fit and cardiovascularly compromised. You can have a clean bill of health and a dangerous coronary artery tree. You can run a half marathon, pass every standard test, eat clean, and still be carrying a rupture risk that nobody has ever measured. The body you live in is extraordinary. It adapts, it compensates, it reroutes, it quietly absorbs decades of damage before sending a single signal. That resilience is a gift. But it is also how the disaster hides. The lesson is not to be afraid. The lesson is to be curious. To stop assuming that the absence of symptoms means the absence of disease. To understand that the most powerful preventive tools available to you today are not medications waiting to be prescribed. They are scans that can make the invisible visible. They are lifestyle variables that are within your control. They are conversations with your physician that begin with, "I want to know what is actually happening inside my arteries," not just what my blood work says. The heart beats 100,000 times a day without asking for anything. The least we can do is pay attention. Have you or someone you know experienced a heart scare that seemed to come from nowhere? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And in the next video, we are going into something equally unexpected about the organ most people forget to think about until it is too late. Make sure you are subscribed to Nature and You so you don't miss it.